Hi everyone, the Artist Series, Dom Famularo here. This is so great at so many levels because I get the chance to talk to these legends in our music industry. And this singer and songwriter, who I have been a fan of for years, iconic songs, an iconic voice, you put that together and you have magic. Would you all please welcome Mr. Lou Gramm. Your voice is just so clear and so unique, and as soon as you hear, just you open your mouth, you get that just sound that is just so heartwarming to hear with all the songs that you've recorded and what you continue to record. So just tell me, going back, Rochester, you came back from the early days, but I got to ask you, your dad was a musician. Was music around the household when you were younger?
All the time. My dad had an Italian family that came over in 1905. There were 10 kids in the family, so he had 9 brothers and sisters. Everybody played an instrument. I think when he was about in the 11th grade, he found some buddies in the band, and they started putting together a swing band. As it would happen, they were looking for a singer, and they auditioned singers, and my mom got the job. She was from another school.
Interesting.
But they started performing together, and next thing you know, they fell in love.
What a beautiful story. What a beautiful
Yes, it is. Yep.
That's the power of music.
Yes, it is. You got that right. And so they got married. My dad had a full-time job, but still played in a small jazz combo on weekends. After a while, my dad knew it was taking a toll on the family, so he put his horn away for 20 years and didn't pick it up until all of us kids were either out of the house or almost out of the house. When he picked it up again, he got his lip back and his armature back, and was practicing real hard, and found some of the guys in his original band when he was in high school and added other guys, and they started playing swing again.
Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. So what kind of music was around the house when you were younger? Were you hearing, a variety of different types of swing music?
Well, yeah, I was basically hearing Glenn Miller, Count Basie, the Dorsey Brothers,
Nice.
Frank and Tony.
Yes, Sinatra and Bennett, there it is.
Yep, and a number of things, and my mom, being a singer, would sing along, in the house. It was really awesome. And by the time I was 6 or 7 years old, I started playing drums. And my first drum set was my uncle's drum set, my dad's brother. And it was a 1928 set of Gretsch drums. It had a 36-inch bass drum. It was huge. And the drums only had the rim on the top, and the bottom heads were tapped in with tacks.
How amazing. That really is.
And so I started learning on that, and eventually I saved up enough money to buy a modest set of more modern drums. So after supper, my dad and I would go in the basement, he with his horn and me on my drums, and he would play swing songs, and I would play drums to them. Before you know it, I knew all the arrangements. After we had played 3 or 4 songs, we'd be in the middle of a song, and we'd see my mom come walking down the basement stairs, swinging a dish towel, and she'd get in front of the mic and start singing.
Boy, this is a beautiful Italian story. I mean, and I can relate to that and how our family grew up, and music was always around the household. So when did singing start to come into your life?
Well, I had an older and younger brother, and my older brother played trumpet and was taught by my father. So that was great. He was a trumpet player in school and everything. And so I'd go out and ride my bike down the street and play with my friends. And then I'd ride my bike back and go down in the basement to play my drums. And when I sat on the drums, the seat was so low that I couldn't play the snare drum. I couldn't even reach the cymbals. I couldn't figure out what in the world was going on. So I'd adjust my seat again and everything. A couple days later, when I go out, I come back, it's like a 20-foot man had sat down on my drums, I had a suspicion, and I ran out the next day. I ran out the door, go to play with my friends, and I ran around the house and looked in the basement window. And I hadn't been gone 5 minutes, and my brother came down the stairs, my older brother, and adjusted all my cymbals in my drums and the seat to fit him, and started playing the drums himself. And you know what the scary thing was? He was amazing. Self-taught and amazing.
Beautiful. So at that point, it's kind of interesting too, because at that point, the drumming influence, when I listen to you sing, I can hear a real smooth rhythmical touch to your voice. Now that really makes sense, that you had some drumming knowledge in the feel of the music to allow you to adapt your vocal parts.
I feel that comes through all the time.
Absolutely. But that really makes a lot of sense, because I always said how rhythmical you were and how great you phrased the songs. You mentioned Sinatra and Tony Bennett. Both of them played the drums.
Is that right?
Absolutely, but they both played the drums, yeah. And it was interesting enough to have that feel rhythmically. So you've got that. You've got that swagger in your voice, which is fantastic. So when did the first band start to happen? When did Black Sheep come into play?
Well, I was in a high school band with some friends, and the band was called Poor Heart. And we played locally a lot. We had a lot of fun. And we made a couple demos, and nothing ever happened with them, but it was sure fun to do it. It was a great experience for me to be in a studio and do that. At some point, that band broke up and was going to a club in Rochester where there were a lot of bands. And I started listening to a lot of groups and earmarking people within the band that I would like to have in my band. I spoke to and hung out with a bunch of different guys, and I got just about everybody I wanted to be in my band. And we were not going to be a top 40 band like most of the other bands around. Everybody was playing radio hits. We would play popular artists, but not the hits. We'd play their lesser known songs. Ultimately, the goal was to write our own songs and record. First of all, we got a deal with Chrysalis Records, and they signed us to a singles deal with the prospect of recording the album if the single did marginally well. At the time of the deal, they were in Europe, in England and Germany, and throughout Europe, and they were just about to come over to the States and have begin their headquarters in the U.S. and start having offices in different places around the country. And that's why they sold us. They wanted to be their hood ornament, so to speak, for breaking through in the States. And we were thrilled about that. But as it turned out, when our first single was released, it didn't get any publicity or backing from Chrysalis. And we were asking them what was going on. What about the promise to stand behind us? They said that they're really sorry, but they've changed their mind about setting up offices in the States, and they were giving us our release.
Now, this was the tune "Stick Around"?
Yes, that's correct.
Interesting. So and so they didn't follow with the release. So how'd you get the second tune going on?
We did find out that Capitol Records was expressing some interest. They picked the band up, and although we didn't put "Stick Around" on the album because it still belonged to Chrysalis, right, for the duration of some time, we recorded a brand new album and with Capitol Records, and they immediately put us on the road with 10 years after. They were very proud of us, and we were proud of ourselves. And we started working on our second album, and we finished that. And they hooked us up to be the special guest for Kiss, because they were releasing a new album, and we were going to be their special guest for the whole tour. And we loved that idea. So our first show was a big theater in Boston. We played our set, and as we were leaving the stage, the crowd wouldn't stop clapping and cheering. And I went over to Kiss's tour manager and I said, "Could we play one more?" And he says, "Yeah, go on, get out there." He says, answer your ovation, Beautiful. So we did, and we brought down the house again. And then we cleaned up and we sat in the audience and listened to Kiss. And this was Christmas Eve, 1975. After Kiss played, we got in our car. The band got in the car and drove home, and the crew was loading the equipment, and they would be about an hour and a half, 2 hours behind us. Well, I got home and I jumped into bed, And about 4:30 in the morning, I got a call from one of our road crew, and he told us that the truck was on the New York State Thruway and slid off the road because there was so much ice on the thruway, and it tipped over. And could we come and pick them up so they could go home and spend Christmas with the family? And he told us where the truck was, a big flatbed picked the truck up and parked it off the thruway at a gas station somewhere between Albany and Syracuse. So me and the bass player drove out and picked up the crew, and we took a look at the truck. I tried to get the back door open, and it was so bent out of shape, it was jammed, because I wanted to see the condition of the equipment.
Yeah.
And I could not. So we drove home, we spent Christmas, and the next day we came back there with tools. And we managed to, with a pry bar, we managed to get the door open, and it was a horrible mess inside. The Marshall amps were all the speakers were destroyed. The power heads, the tubes were all smashed. The amplifiers fell on the drums in the cases, but bent them so they weren't round anymore.
Jeez.
Yep. And the Hammond B3 had the legs knocked out from under it.
Unbelievable.
2 days after Christmas, we were supposed to meet KISS in Miami. They weren't aware of what happened to us, so I called the tour manager there and told them that night after Boston, we got in an accident and lost our truck and about 75% of our equipment. And although we had insurance on the truck and the equipment, they were not very forthcoming with a check. So they asked if we could borrow equipment from a local music store, or could our parents help us out. And there was a recession in the U.S. at that point, 75. We asked our parents if they could just help us buy some used equipment so we could honor our commitment to KISS and keep promoting our second album. And they could not. And we asked music stores if they could help us. Well, we asked Capitol Records if they could help. That's our record company, and the album was on their label. I would think if they wanted us to promote that album and hopefully live up to our potential, I think they were a big enough company to help us buy a small truck and some equipment.
Absolutely.
And they not only said no, but they dropped us from the label.
Unbelievable.
Yep.
Unbelievable. Well, when you said the insurance company was not forthright, how polite and political of you. I probably would use a harsher term than that.
Well, you know what? We this was like I said, the end of December, early January. We got a check for the equipment in the truck at the end of April of the next year. Okay. Talk about timing, right?
So the band broke up at that point when it was dropped?
We didn't exactly break up. We didn't have any equipment at all, and we had little tiny amps, like practice amps, but we would meet twice a week at somebody's house and talk about the band, how we were doing, and about the tragedy and what we could do now, That's when I got a message from my mom that somebody named Mick Jones called her and my father's house, and wants me to call back. I was a little reluctant to call back. I wasn't. I was so bummed out. I wasn't interested in talking to anybody. I met him when he was in Spooky Tooth, because Black Sheep's manager was an A&M Records rep.
Interesting.
Jim Taylor, his name was.
Yeah. Huh?
Yep. And so he took us to see Spooky Tooth at the Auditorium Theater in Rochester, and we met the guys. And I gave Mick the 2 Black Sheep albums to listen to. And so when he called me, he said he was real sorry about the potential demise of the band. He said, but I'm not with Spooky Tooth anymore. He says, I've started my own band. He says, and I listened to your albums. I'm really interested in you being the singer for my new band. Would you come to New York and audition? And I said, you know, Mick, I said, that's a real nice thing to say to me. So I did. Apparently, I found out when I got to New York that there were already over 30 singers that have auditioned. So I wasn't the first guy that auditioned by a long shot.
Yeah.
And so I spent about 3 or 4 days with the band singing. They auditioned me in a recording studio. So when I sang, they were recording it. So at a later point after I left, they could listen to it. And then they had a new song that they were working on, and they threw me into the control room with a pen and paper, and in front of the mics, they wanted me to write a few lyrics and then sing them to the new song. Boy, put me on the spot, you know?
Love it. I love it. I love it.
And I delivered, you know? And then after that, Mick says, come on over to my house tonight, have dinner, and we can work on a couple songs. So we did. And then the next day we went to our little rehearsal spot and worked on more songs. And I took Mick aside. I says, when I came here to audition, I said I had 1 pair of pants, 3 T-shirts, and a change of underwear. I says, I've gone through all of those already, and I haven't been able to wash my clothes. I says, I've got to go home and get some clothes. By that time, before I left, I says, look, I says, we've been writing, we've been recording, we've been playing. I says, but you know what? You guys have not told me, am I in? And they says, yeah, you're in.
Well, I think what's amazing, Lou, is I want people to really understand as you're telling the story that this is perseverance and dedication at its highest level. Here you are just pursuing this. You know, we say it's a dream, but you had this deep passion that you wanted to be a part of something bigger, and the sacrifices that you were putting through just came with the territory. So now, was the band called Foreigner at the early times? When we were rehearsing in our manager, Bud Breger, had the top floor of a building in Manhattan. And so there were offices all around it, but the center was a big open room, and that's where we would write and rehearse. Mick and I would go to his house after rehearsals and work on new ideas, and then we'd bring them in the next day or so, and the band would start playing them, and we would craft them, you know. And we would work on the arrangement too, not just put together a song like a slab of meat, you know. We would work on the arrangement, because Mick, as I found out at that time, was personal friends with Paul and George and John and Ringo. As a matter of fact, when they were playing in Germany, he was there almost every night, because he had a band of his own that played occasionally in Germany, but he was there to see the Beatles every night, to the point where he was the only other British guy that they knew in Germany. And when they found out he played guitar, he was on stage with them every night. So he got a chance to really kind of absorb that magical feeling that the Beatles had. That feeling was also brought into Foreigner.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. Mick is a wonderful songwriter, and writing songs like that are second nature to him.
You know, I'm always intrigued with the names of bands. Foreigner has become such an iconic name for the band. Who thought of that? How'd that come into play?
Well, at first we were calling ourselves Trigger. And I said, Mick, I says, the one of the triggers I know is me. It's a horse. I think that's Roy Rogers' horse.
Roy Rogers' horse was called Trigger, exactly.
Yeah, and when I said that, everybody looked at each other, and that was the end of that name. And for a few months after that, we had no name. And then Mick brought up Foreigner, because there were 3 Brits, 3 Americans. So no matter what side of the ocean we were on, we were still foreigners.
Oh, that is beautiful. That is absolutely beautiful. So the name stuck, and here you are. But songs like Waiting for a Girl Like You and I Want to Know What Love Is, you helped co-write these songs, correct?
I did help co-write them, although I didn't get any credit for I Want to Know What Love Is.
Where did the co-writing lyrical part of you come out of?
You know, I've always loved writing melodies and lyrics. I liked working on arrangements and everything too. and he was the master of arrangements. And so we crafted both of those songs together. Extremely proud of both of them. So after we would record an album, Mick and I would sit down and we'd run down the list of the songs, and he would say, what do you think you want on this song? And I would say, I think this one I contributed quite a bit. I would ask for about 40%, and he said, that's fine, and there were a lot of songs like Hot Flooded and things like that where it was 50-50, a lot of songs. Wow. And Waiting for a Girl, he really wrote most of that, but I had a good part of that too. I think that was 65-30, and then Ian McDonald had a little piece of that too. I was fine with that, but then I Want to Know What Love Is. The two of us, he had a home in Bedford Hills. His home was about 15 minutes from my home in Katona. So I would drive over to his house and we would work on that song. There'd be moments where it was just magic, and then we hit our head on something creatively that we couldn't get to the next point, and so we'd almost have to put the song away for a couple of weeks and come back to it again. I felt we had worked our tails off to make that song what it is, and at the end of that album, when it was time to decide what the percentages were, I wrote down what I thought it should be, and he'd write down what he thought it should be. I think I wrote down 65-35, 35 for me, 65 for him. And I opened a little piece of paper that what he thought it was, and he wrote down 95-5. And I was so stunned and crushed that he think I contributed next to nothing to that song. And here's another one for you. He was working with the choir in one studio while we were recording that song. I was in another studio with an engineer singing the lead vocals. Okay, I did them by myself. I did all the ad libs. I did all the emotional little nuances and stuff, And usually when I'd sing the lead to a song, especially a song as potentially as important as that one, he was right in the control room, commenting on every line. This could be better. That you could do that. You could do this. I did the whole thing myself while he was working with the choir, and that ended up being the lead vocal. I don't even remember him saying "Good job, Lou," but that was the lead vocal, and I thought that was a pretty serious accomplishment for me to only to be denigrated to an offer of 5%. That put a wedge in us. That was the beginning of the end.
Boy, this is the dynamics of a family type band as they get together in the process, and it really kind of, unfortunately, sometimes is extremely challenging. So the business side you would discuss beforehand or afterhand?
After it was recorded, we would discuss who put what into the song, and here's what the split should be. And for the most part, we were always within 5 or 10%, and we'd iron it out. I said 65-35, 65 to him, 35 to me, and he comes back with 95-5. I should get 25 just for the vocal performance.
Right.
All I could think of was greed. It was an awesome song. We all knew it was going to be a smash. This was his chance to step on me, And you know what I told him after 95-5? I says, 5, Mick. I says, you should just keep it all, and he did. He didn't say no, Lou. No, please, let's work on it. I said, Mick, you should just keep 5% for me after all the work I did on this song. I says, you should just keep it all, and he didn't say anything. He just kept it all.
Interesting.
And do you know the millions and millions that song has brought in over the years? It's been covered by at least 3 or 4 artists who have gone to #1 with that song.
Yeah, yeah. Boy, this really is unfortunately very typical in the industry and how relationships fall apart and are challenged in our industry. And these are lessons for people to understand as they listen to this, to prepare themselves for some of the challenges and prepare themselves for the negotiations of what's happening. Did you have an entertainment lawyer? Was there anyone that assisted you in any of this?
No,
Would having an entertainment lawyer been a better step for you?
maybe. I Want to Know What Love Is was on our 5th album. I certainly knew him long enough and knew the way he is. I had my guard up for the rest of my time in Foreigner. My guard was up. The next album, because of what went down with I Want to Know What Love Is, he wrote all the songs. He made a mistake because when I started singing, it was not the kind of singing that he liked. I was singing, but I was not giving it my all, like I was singing for the band I love to pieces and would do anything for. I was withholding my emotions and my expertise. The vocals were okay. And he was losing his mind. I would sing a song, after we were ready to sing the vocals, I would sing a song a day. As soon as I was done with that song, I put my coat on and leave. I had nothing to do with any of the rest of the songs, any of the musical parts, any of the harmonies, any of the arrangements, nothing. I sang my vocal parts and I went home.
So you were clocking in and clocking out.
That's exactly right.
That's a part of the challenges in our business with the ups and downs of relationships. And as I said, these band member family type of relationships, when they get challenged, it can be very, very depressing for sure.
I think he made a big mistake by doing what he did to me. He didn't need to do that. He had 50 to 70% of every song that was written. And for that song, because people were going bananas over it as we were recording it, and he knew that Atlantic was going to push it and make it a #1 song, he decided to get greedy. And he really did get greedy.
Boy, it's such a shame to hear in the relationship and how close it was, and how you guys were probably all like brothers as you were traveling at certain points. And
that all came to an end too. I think it was about 1991. We played Madison Square Garden. After the show, had a big meal and we were drinking. I got back to my hotel room. I felt very strange. I asked God to take this burden away from me, that I did not want to live like this anymore. And the next morning I called my attorney and asked him if he would book me into a rehab. After 15, 16 years of partying very hard, and I've got 30 years sobriety in right now.
Beautiful. Congratulations. Absolutely beautiful, Lou. That is really an incredible accomplishment. And the fact that you're here today to tell that story is a story of inspiration for people to hear and listen to and apply to their lives.
Thank you. After my rehab, I was supposed to lay low for a number of months before starting to participate with the band again. So I continued to perform with the band, and I started getting brutal headaches for no reason at all. They weren't hangovers or anything, because I had already been 7 or 8 years sober, and I couldn't figure out what they were. And I'd also start having very spotty long and short-term memory. Like I'd go to call my parents who had the same phone number for 30 years. I'd get the first 3 numbers right, and the last 4 I had to look up. I finally went and had an MRI. The brain surgeon told me I had something called cranial pharyngioma. So I had a tumor on my right frontal lobe that was the size of a large egg. And it had tentacles that moved across my forehead, wrapped around my optic nerve, and planted themselves in my pituitary. So my pituitary works at about 15 or 20% now. My optic nerves, thank God, are fine. My adrenals are 100% defunct. The doctor who took the MRI gave me the name and number of his friend in New York City, who is a renowned brain tumor specialist. I called the gentleman and made an appointment to fly down to New York City. And I got there and they did another MRI. And he said, Lewis, he says, I'm sending you home. I says, is that good news, doctor? He says, I'm sending you home to put your affairs in order. Hate to say this to you, but this tumor is inoperable. So I was so stunned. I can't tell you how I felt. I felt like I was walking death already. You know, for about a week and a half, 2 weeks, I didn't say anything to anybody. I like to watch 2020 program, 2020. And I watched 2020 on a Monday night. And they had a segment about a doctor, Dr. Black, who was the head of brain surgery at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston. And he was the purveyor of laser surgery to remove tumors that were considered hopelessly inoperable. And I watched that segment and my eyes were like saucers. And the tears were coming down the sides of my cheeks. And it was just a shred of hope. And at the end of the segment, he gave his office number. And I was on the phone with his secretary at 8 a.m. the next morning and told her my situation and what I had been told by other doctors who had given me MRIs and checked me out. His secretary told me, these are the kind of cases that Dr. Black is especially good at. She says, we're usually really backed up, but there was someone who was going to get brain surgery this Thursday and passed away. So it was Tuesday morning, and she says, so we have an opening for Thursday morning. Can you fly to Boston today? And I got all my stuff together, all my other MRIs, all my assessments from the other doctors. And Dr. Black gave me an MRI. And we talked for about an hour after the MRI. And he told me, he says, you know, the doctors that told you this was incredibly serious, he says that they weren't lying to you. He says, this is really serious. He goes, this may be one of the most difficult surgeries in all my years that I've been a doctor. He says, but I believe, he says, that we can remove that tumor and you can live a normal life. So 5 a.m. in the morning, they came to get me from my room and start putting me under as they were wheeling me into the operating room. And the operation started at 6 in the morning and it lasted 19 hours.
Unbelievable.
19 hours.
Incredible.
And they were able to remove all of it except a little piece of it that was caught between two lobes of my brain. It wasn't cancerous at all. He came to see me, not that night, because I slept that night and the whole next day. It was the following evening. He stopped by my room to tell me that the operation was a complete success. He did tell me that there was some damage done, but nothing that prevented me from living a completely normal life, that the recovery might take as much as 5 or 6 years for complete recovery. When I went home, after having the radiation done, I was on massive steroids, and within about 3 or 4 months, went from 145 pounds to about 245 pounds. There was nothing that I owned that fit me. I had to throw out all my clothes and buy new XXX clothes for underwear, t-shirts, pants, everything. And Dr. Black told me he didn't want me performing for at least a year and a half and to check with him periodically. And he would tell me when he thought it was safe for me to perform. No sooner had I gotten home from the hospital than my manager called me and said, because we had to postpone shows because of your operation, The shows that were first postponed are rescheduled, and we're going to be playing them in about 3 weeks. I wasn't even remotely healed, and here I was in the back of a bus playing shows. I played Japan. The operation was in 1997. By 1997, I mean, I had been with the band 21 or 22 years, and we had 6 or 7 albums. I couldn't remember the words to half the songs because my memory was compromised temporarily. I had to get cards and write the first 3 or 4 words of every verse of every song, so that when the song came up in the list, I could glance down at the card and see how the song started. And then once I started singing it, the rest came naturally.
Boy, what a trooper, Lou. I mean, it really is incredible that you pursued and found a way to still entertain and share your talent and your voice with millions.
I'm glad I was able to do that. If the guys in the band and the management really cared about me as a person, they would know that it was so reckless and deterrent for my health to be where I was.
Yeah, too soon.
But they were more worried about honoring contracts than me living or dying, I think.
Boy, Lou, what a story. Well, you were inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame, and that is something which is an incredible accomplishment.
Yes, it is. Very proud of that.
Really, that it's absolutely wonderful. Let me ask you a question. What motivates you?
I love singing. I love performing songs, and I love being part of a good band that is proud of its heritage.
Absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. Lou, your story is so fantastic, and the book JUKE BOX HERO, I think, is a must for everyone to read. But I'd like to ask you something. In closing, Lou, we've got all these young students that listen to us, and they are hanging on to every word that you say. What would you say to this next generation in a message from your experience and what you've been through? What kind of advice would you give them?
If you're considering music as a hobby, I would say just play to the best of your ability, dress the part, look the part, and be professional. Have a stature that you really need to maintain. Even if you never end up playing the stadium, you'll still feel and look the part of a professional, and you'll have that bearing.
Boy, well said, Lou. Well said. It's your story is so inspirational. Your story is so real, and your story is a message that should be heard. That for someone that wants to continue and persevere, there's got to be that depth of passion which you clearly have, Lou. Not only in every lyric that you sing, every lyric that you write, but even every word that you say. It's absolutely powerful. And the Artist Series, thanks you so much for joining us, Lou. You are an absolute, international and national treasure. When I hear your voice, it just lifts me up to a higher level.
Thank you so much. That's awesome.
You have done fantastic. Thank you so much, Lou. Stay well, and hopefully we'll meet real soon.
I'd love it. Thanks. Bye now.
Dom Famularo here, the Sessions panel. This is so exciting. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Click the subscribe button to be a part of what we're doing. The views help us tremendously. All of your comments, we read them and react to them. This is incredible. The support you're giving us is great. The Sessions panel. We'll see you real soon.